That transmission replacement quote your shop just handed you? A lot of the time, it is solving a problem a $12 bottle of fluid could have stopped years earlier. Today, we are breaking down 15 ways this cheap fix quietly saves transmissions that never needed to die in the first place, counting down by the exact dollar amount it cost you to ignore them. Let us start with number 15. Number 15. Misreading the dipstick level. The simplest transmission check is also the one drivers get wrong most often, assuming that as long as there is some liquid on the stick, the system is completely fine. It is not that forgiving. A commuter named Greg wanted to check the fluid on his 2016 Mazda 3. Mazda actually kept a dipstick on their Skyactiv transmissions, but they hid it way down under the plastic air intake box and locked it down with a tiny 10mm bolt so regular drivers wouldn't mess with it. Greg unbolted it, but he checked the fluid while the engine was completely cold and turned off, leading him to think the level was perfect when it was actually nearly a quart low. He noticed the car was shifting with a strange hesitation, so he drove it to a local transmission franchise. The service counter charged him $40 for a basic diagnostic inspection fee just to tell him why his gears were running hot and why his fluid level reading was completely wrong. Transmission fluid expands significantly when it reaches operating temperature. If you check it cold, the level will read artificially low, tempting you to overfill it. If you check it while the engine is completely shut off, the fluid that normally circulates through the Torques converter drains back down into the pan, giving you a completely false reading of security. Greg's cold check hit a low fluid level that was actively starving the internal hydraulic pump during his morning highway commute. Topping off the fluid correctly costs next to nothing compared to the $40 spent on a diagnostic fee for a simple reading mistake. But checking a dipstick is only half the battle. What happens when you grab a cheap universal bottle from a gas station shelf to fix a low fluid level fast? What comes up next is an absolute chemical nightmare. Number 14. Falling for generic multi-vehicle fluids. Many drivers assume transmission fluid is universal, picking up whatever generic bottle is cheapest on the auto parts shelf without looking at the fine print on the back of the label. They treat it like windshield washer fluid, assuming any brand will get the job done. A college student named Chloe used a generic, high-mileage multi-vehicle fluid to top off her 2018 Mazda CX-5, completely unaware her specific Skyactiv drive system required a highly specialized, ultra-low viscosity factory formula known as Mazda ATF-FZ, which is uniquely colored blue-green instead of regular red. Within a week of mixing the standard parts store fluid with the factory blue fluid, the car's computer began throwing transmission performance codes. The shifts became aggressively jerky, and a specialty shop charged her $65 to perform a complete system flush to get the incorrect fluid out before it ruined the internal clutches. Modern transmissions are engineered around precise friction coefficients. The internal clutches depend on exact fluid thickness to grab and release without slipping. Generic fluids are formulated as a compromise to fit 50 different car models, meaning they lack the exact additive package your specific Skyactiv valves and clutch plates require to grip properly. A $12 bottle of the exact manufacturer-specified fluid, or $65 paying a shop to undo a chemical mismatch. A quick reminder, if you are enjoying the video, subscribe right now so you do not miss out on how to keep your car out of the shop. But wrong chemicals are not the only threat. If you live anywhere that gets freezing weather, you are running a massive mechanical risk every single morning before you even put the car in drive. See what happens next when you accelerate on a frozen morning? Number 13. Winter cold start damage from thick fluid. Many vehicle owners assume that transmission fluid only breaks down when it gets too hot, completely ignoring the mechanical damage that happens at the exact opposite end of the temperature spectrum. An office manager named Kevin rushed out of his house on a 0-degree winter morning, immediately threw his 2015 Jeep Grand Cherokee into drive, and accelerated hard onto the main road. Within 2 miles, the transmission began slipping and shifting with a violent jerk, leading to an $85 diagnostic fee at a local dealership to find out why his hydraulic pressure had completely bottomed out. When transmission fluid gets extremely cold, it thickens significantly, turning into a heavy syrup that cannot easily flow through the microscopic passages of the valve body or lubricate the upper drive gears. Accelerating hard before the fluid has a chance to warm up and thin out starves the internal bearings, causing metal components to shave tiny debris shards off each other. An $85 fee for a hard lesson in cold weather hydraulics when letting the car idle for 2 minutes would have allowed the internal fluid pump to circulate warm oil safely. When those metal shavings spend months floating around in your oil, the liquid undergoes a terrifying transformation. It literally turns into an abrasive slush that grinds down your gears, which brings us directly to our next spot. Number 12. Letting old fluid turn into sandpaper. People assume fluid just gets old, the way milk goes bad, a vague decline with no real physical mechanism behind it. There is an actual destructive process happening inside the case. Fresh fluid is a clear reddish color, But as it ages, it darkens toward brown and eventually black. A landscaper named Ruben noticed the fluid on his 2011 Toyota Tacoma looked muddy, but he kept driving anyway, unaware that the dark color meant tiny particles of worn clutch material were now suspended in the liquid. A mobile mechanic charged him $95 to manually clear out a sticky shift solenoid that had become jammed by the circulating debris. Those floating particles turned the fluid into a liquid sandpaper, grinding down the very valve bores responsible for directing smooth hydraulic pressure. The longer you let that dirty fluid circulate, the more metal it shears off the components, creating a feedback loop of destruction. A $95 repair for a sticky valve, or changing the fluid early to flush those abrasive particles out of the system for good. Once that internal grit blocks up your hydraulic channels, the smooth shifting disappears entirely, replaced by a terrifying physical jolt that violently rocks the cabin. Look at what happens next when that pressure drop hits. Number 11. Ignoring the delayed shift or hard clunk. Most drivers who feel a sudden clunk assume something massive just broke structurally, jumping straight to worrying about a major component failure. Often the gears are fine, and the issue is completely hydraulic. A real estate agent named Sarah started noticing a distinct 2-second delay when shifting her 2013 Chevy Malibu from park into drive, followed by a loud, unsettling clunk as the gear finally caught. A dealership charged her $120 for a full transmission health evaluation after she panicked and had the vehicle brought in. Low or breaking down fluid means hydraulic pressure cannot build fast enough inside the passages, causing the delay, while the hard clunk is the clutch pack finally slamming shut once the pressure catches up. It is the automotive equivalent of a garden hose sputtering before releasing a massive pocket of trapped water. $120 just to be told her fluid level was low, a problem that takes 2 minutes to solve at home with a funnel. But gears do not just complain loudly, they cook. If you miss the physical clunk, your nose will catch what is coming next when a scorched scent starts pouring through your interior vents. Number 10. Driving through the burnt fluid smell. A lot of drivers assume any strange smell from the engine bay is just an old car being an old car, nothing specific to worry about. That is a massive gamble that ends in scorched components. A shift manager named David noticed a sweet, scorched odor after driving his 2009 Ford Mustang up a steep mountain pass, but he decided to wait a month before checking it out. By the time he took it in, the fluid had oxidized completely from the heat, and a shop charged him $140 to drop the pan and replace the scorched internal filter. Overheated fluid gives off a distinct burnt odor, signaling that the additive package has broken down completely under high thermal stress and can no longer protect the metal surfaces. Once fluid reaches this state, its lubrication capabilities drop to zero, leaving metal components to rub directly against each other. $140 replacing a baked filter and cleaning out varnish, or a quick fluid check the moment a strange smell appears. If a simple trip over a mountain pass can boil your oil like that, imagine the damage you're doing if you use your vehicle to haul heavy objects. Check out what is next when you hook a trailer to your bumper. Number 9. Ruining fluid properties by occasional towing. Plenty of occasional truck owners assume that because they only tow a camper or a boat a couple of weekends a year, their transmission wear is basically the same as any daily driver. It is not even close. A contractor named Dale used his 2016 Ford F-150 to haul a heavy utility trailer a few times a summer, completely unaware that stop-and-go driving with a load qualifies as severe duty. A transmission specialist charged him $180 to diagnose a rough shifting issue that only showed up while he was actively hauling. Towing generates massive internal heat, which shears the fluid molecules and cuts its protective lifespan squarely in half compared to normal highway cruising. The transmission temperature spikes so fast under load that standard fluid can degrade in a single afternoon of fighting a headwind. $180 chasing a severe duty shifting issue or simply following the shorter towing service interval outlined in the owner's manual. If you are following the video, hit the like button right. When that towing heat thins the fluid completely, the oil pump starts gasping for air, creating a strange, ghostly hum under the hood. What comes next is a vocal sound that completely tricks drivers into replacing the wrong part. Number 8. Misdiagnosing a pressure whine as an alternator. A faint whining or humming noise that changes pitch with engine speed gets misdiagnosed constantly because it sounds exactly like a failing accessory belt, a bad power steering pump, or a dying bearing. A nurse named Priya spent $210 replacing the alternator on her 2010 Chevy Cobalt, trying to silence a persistent high-pitched whine that kept getting louder when she accelerated. The noise stayed exactly the same because the real culprit was a clogged transmission fluid filter starving the internal pump. When transmission fluid is old or low, the pump draws in air bubbles, causing fluid aeration that creates a distinct hydraulic whine as the foam passes through the pressure regulator. Priya replaced an entirely healthy electrical part because she did not realize a starving hydraulic system makes the exact same sound. $210 thrown away on a perfectly good alternator, all because nobody checked the fluid first. However, rushing to get a fluid flush to cure that noise won't save you if you try to cut corners. Look at what is next if you leave the old filter trapped inside to poison the fresh oil immediately. Number 7. Skipping the filter during a fluid swap. When owners finally decide to service their transmission, many choose the lazy route, draining the fluid from the plug but leaving the old original filter trapped inside the pan to save on labor. A warehouse supervisor named Renata changed the fluid on her 2007 Nissan Altima, but skipped replacing the internal filter to save 20 minutes of labor. Within 3 months, the old filter became so restricted with trapped varnish that it restricted fluid flow, costing her $240 for a professional diagnostic and a second fluid swap to do the job right. A fresh bottle of fluid cannot do its job if it is constantly being forced through a microscopic mesh screen that is already choked with a decade of debris. Draining the fluid without changing the filter is like taking a shower and putting your dirty clothes back on. $240 and a wasted Saturday afternoon, or spending the extra $10 for a fresh filter the first time the pan is dropped. The crazy thing is, most people ignore this filter entirely because they fall for a specific phrase printed right inside their owner's manual. What is coming next is a corporate marketing trap that kills thousands of vehicles. Number 6. Falling for the myth of lifetime fluid. A lot of owners hear the phrase lifetime fluid on a window sticker or in a marketing brochure and assume it means the fluid lasts forever. That is an incredibly costly misunderstanding that guarantees an early trip to the repair shop. A retired postal worker named Dennis drove his 2010 Buick LaCrosse for 130,000 miles without ever touching the transmission, trusting the factory lifetime label blindly. When the car began shuddering violently on the highway, a dealership charged him $280 for a computer module reset and an emergency fluid service, warning him the label only covers the warranty period. In manufacturer language, lifetime typically refers only to the length of the initial factory warranty, which is usually around 60,000 miles, not the actual life of the vehicle. Past 100,000 miles, that factory fluid is completely spent, thin, and filled with moisture. $280 dealing with a highway shudder or accepting that no oil remains fresh forever. If you swallow that lifetime marketing lie, the hidden fluid breakdown eventually triggers a mechanical slip under acceleration. What comes next is a terrifying loss of grip that means your clock has officially run out. Number 5. Waiting until the transmission slips under acceleration. There is a common assumption that any slip under acceleration means the gears are completely finished, so there is no point in even checking the fluid. That is not always true if you catch it immediately. A rideshare driver named Denise felt her 2015 Nissan Altima's engine rev up sharply for a split second before the transmission finally caught and accelerated. She ignored it for 3 weeks, and by the time she sought help, a transmission shop charged her $320 for diagnostic teardown labor, finding the clutch packs were heavily glazed from running on worn-out fluid. Slipping means the clutch plates are not gripping firmly enough to transfer power, a problem that fresh fluid can often stop if the friction modifiers are restored before the material burns off completely. If you change the fluid at the very first slip, you can save the transmission, but wait a few weeks and the clutches will burn down to bare metal. $320 in diagnostic labor because she waited, or a $12 bottle of fluid used at the very first sign of hesitation. If you try to ignore that slipping sensation, the car's computer will lock a hard error code into its memory, instantly triggering a dashboard light. What hits next is a legal registration nightmare that forces you off the road. Number 4. Failing a vehicle safety inspection over transmission codes. In states and provinces with strict annual safety and emissions inspections, an illuminated check engine light caused by a transmission performance code results in an automatic, immediate failure. A school teacher named Wendy took her 2013 Subaru Forester in for its annual inspection, completely unaware that an internal transmission pressure code had triggered a hidden pending fault in the computer. She expected a routine pass, but instead, the station handed her an automatic failure notice. This sudden administrative setback ended up costing her $360 for the failed inspection fee, a forced diagnostic fee, and a mandatory rush service to clear the code before her registration expired. When old fluid fails to maintain proper hydraulic pressure, the vehicle's internal sensors flag the pressure drop as a mechanical fault, turning on the warning light. You cannot simply clear the code with a basic scan tool to trick the system, because the moment the sensors detect the thin, degraded fluid again during driving cycles, the light pops right back on. $360 and a stressful week of running back and forth to the inspection center, or maintaining clean fluid so the internal sensors never have a reason to throw a code. Desperate to clear that inspection light, many owners try pouring a thick, gooey chemical fluid down the tube instead of actually changing the oil. See what happens next when those miracle-in-a-can traps block your pathways entirely, turning a minor pressure drop into a catastrophic, expensive mechanical nightmare that completely ruins the internal valve body. Number 3. blindly trusting to generic additive fixes. When a transmission starts acting up, plenty of owners rush to buy a bottle of magic stop-slip chemical additive, hoping a cheap pour-in miracle will fix a deep mechanical issue without any tools. A young father named Alex tried pouring 2 bottles of a heavy stop, leak additive into his 2014 Dodge Journey to cure a rough shift, rather than simply changing the worn fluid. The thick, gooey additives ended up gumming up the precision valve body entirely, resulting in a $390 repair bill at a specialty transmission shop to remove the pan, flush the sticky chemical sludge out, and replace the ruined electronic solenoids. There is no mechanic in a can. Thickening additives might mask a symptom for a single day by making the fluid sticky, but they alter the fluid's viscosity so drastically that they eventually starve the upper gears of vital lubrication during cold starts. $390 cleaning out chemical sludge, or fixing the problem correctly with a standard fluid change. Because if those sticky chemicals completely choke off your oil flow while you're driving at 70 miles an hour, the car drops straight into neutral. What comes next is a truly life-threatening highway crisis. Number 2. Total vehicle loss from a highway near miss. When fluid is neglected for long enough, the transmission can drop out of gear entirely without warning, a failure mode that transforms a mechanical nuisance into an immediate safety crisis. A traveling nurse named Danielle was driving her 2004 Toyota Camry down a dark, unlit highway when the transmission suddenly slipped into neutral, leaving her completely without power as a semi-truck approached from behind. Blinding headlights filled her rearview mirror as the heavy rig barreled down on her decelerating vehicle, its air horns blaring into the night. With no throttle response to escape the closing truck, panic set in. She had to coast blindly onto a pitch-black shoulder, desperately fighting the heavy steering as she left the pavement. In the darkness, her passenger side front wheel violently clipped a hidden piece of construction debris, a heavy impact that tore through the rubber and bent the steel rim. This terrifying ordeal caused $440 in wheel and tire damage, plus the steep cost of an emergency midnight tow to a rural mechanic shop. When the internal fluid pressure drops below the minimum threshold required to hold a gear, the transmission will physically disengage to protect itself, completely cutting your ability to accelerate out of harm's way. Danielle's near miss was entirely preventable, caused by fluid that had degraded into thin water over a decade of neglect. $440 in sudden roadside wheel damage, and an incredibly dangerous night on the shoulder, all tracing back to fluid that had been neglected for close to a decade. The hydraulic pressure simply vanished, leaving her at the mercy of highway traffic. Surviving a highway near miss will shake you to your core, but it is just a warning before you reach our final spot, where the gears completely melt into iron sludge. Number 1. Facing a full transmission rebuild or replacement. This is the absolute end of the line, the final financial penalty that happens when every single warning sign on this list is completely ignored year after year. A retired firefighter named Walter watched his 2003 Ford F-150 go from shifting slightly hard to slipping to whining without ever checking the fluid or dropping the pan. When the truck finally refused to move backward or forward in a grocery store parking lot, a transmission specialist confirmed the internal clutches had burned down to bare metal, handing him a bill for $3,800 for a complete rebuild. What Walter did not realize is that a modern automatic transmission does not experience a sudden, random heart attack. It experiences a slow, predictable starvation. When fluid shears down and loses its thermal properties, the internal hydraulic pressure drops significantly. Without enough pressure to firmly hold the planetary gears and clutch packs together, those thin friction plates begin to microscopically slide against one another under acceleration. That microscopic sliding creates massive local heat spikes reaching over 400 degrees, literally baking the protective friction material right off the steel backing plates, until there is nothing left but bare metal grinding against bare metal. The transmissions that last 200,000 miles and the ones that die completely at 80,000 miles are almost always the exact same mechanical design. The components are identical, the tolerances are identical, and the factory engineering is identical. Whether you are driving a heavy-duty pickup truck or a modern high-compression Mazda utilizing a Skyactiv drive system, the mechanical physics do not change. The only real difference is whether the owner spent $12 to change the fluid on time, or waited until the delicate parts cooked themselves inside the aluminum case. A $3,800 replacement bill, or a $12 bottle of fluid, and a simple maintenance routine that keeps the internal components running exactly the way the factory engineers intended. It is the cheapest insurance policy you will ever buy for your vehicle. If you have been noticing a delayed shift, a strange smell, or a whine you cannot quite place under your hood, drop a comment with your vehicle's make, model, and current mileage. Let us know if checking your fluid level changes anything, or if you discovered that hidden dipstick we talked about earlier. I read through the comments personally and want to help you troubleshoot before a local shop hands you a massive teardown estimate. Hey, thanks for watching. If you found these car hacks helpful, let us know by smashing that like button right now. Want to see how to make your brakes last twice as long and save hundreds on your next brake job? Click on the video popping up on your left right now. And if you do not want to miss more Insider Vehicle tips and maintenance secrets, hit that subscribe button so you always stay ahead of the repair shops. We will see you in the next video.